Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Chicosky, and I am recording from Mascoutah, Illinois. The following presentation is my honors thesis requirement. And before I begin, I would like to give a very big thank you to my faculty advisor, Dr. Guy Boyson. He's been an absolutely wonderful mentor helping me on my project titled Addiction and Stigma, Differences in Attitudes Toward Self-Medicating Behaviors. To begin, I would like to give you an overview of what to expect from this presentation. First, I will introduce you to some background knowledge on this topic, and then I will propose to you the purpose of my research into this topic. My research is made of two different studies. So first we will talk about study 1 and the methods and discussion of it, and then we will talk about study 2 and the methods and discussion that go along with it. And then we will conclude with some big ideas and some possible future research. First, I would like to introduce you to Harry. Harry enjoys mountain biking and climbing rocks, and he's 25 and has a loving relationship with his girlfriend. Would your opinion be different of Harry if I told you that he is addicted to opioids? Now, let's consider the following case. Harry was in a terrible car accident, had to have major surgery on his back. His medical provider prescribed him with some opioids to help him deal with the pain, but unfortunately, Harry decided the pain was too much for him to bear, and he decided to self-medicate with opioids, and unfortunately, created an addiction. Now, let's consider this case. Harry recently breaks up with his girlfriend. He is so distraught that he develops depression, and he decides to self-medicate in order to combat this psychological pain. Would your opinion of Harry be different between these two cases? Previous research has shown that both physical and mental illnesses are impacted by stigma. Stigma is a multidimensional concept in which people use stereotypes and labeling to base their judgments, their attitudes, and behaviors towards groups of people. So, for example, you might come across a stigma of mental illness that says that people who have a mental illness are uncontrollable and terrible people, and they should all be locked away in an insane asylum. That would be a form of stigma. It's been found that addiction is stigmatized more than any other behavioral or emotional disorder. And this can be a problem, as stigma creates a cycle of discouragement for addicts. A cycle may look like this, proposed by Henderson and Dressler in 2017. Addicts feel stigma from their addiction themselves. They feel terrible that they have an addiction. They feel judgment from others. So they go and they seek out help. However, when they go and seek help, that means that they have to admit that they are an addict, and there is stigma from being an addict, from just the label of it. So then they feel this stigma and they stop seeking help because they don't want to feel like they are an addict. And it keeps going in a cycle. They feel the stigma from addiction, seek out help, addict, stop seeking help. And sometimes addicts may never receive the help that they truly need. And it's been found that individuals may develop an addiction from physical or psychological pain. As we've seen with Harry, physical pain may be from surgery or illness or injury. Psychological pain may be grief. Maybe you have recently lost a loved one. Or, in some cases, depression is actually considered chronic psychological pain. And it's been found that psychological pain is stigmatized more than physical pain. However, no research has looked at the stigmatization of self-medicating behaviors or addiction, like we saw with Harry, between physical and psychological pain. Although we can see that there is a stigmatization of both addiction and physical and psychological pain, there hasn't been research that has combined the two. So, the purpose of the current research of my study was to examine the relationship between stigmatization of an addiction and the cause, whether it be physical or psychological pain. My hypothesis was that an addiction caused by psychological pain will be stigmatized more than an addiction caused by physical pain. And so we have our two studies. For the first study, I had 158 participants that consisted of recruited MTurk workers. MTurk is Amazon's Mechanical Turk. It's an online platforming service where you can pay for participants to partake in your study, and it's been proven to be very reliable in previous studies. Of this sample, 52% were female, 71% reported that they were white, and there was an average age of 38 with a standard deviation of 12. For the method, the participants completed a survey via SurveyMonkey, in which they read a fictional description of an individual with an opioid addiction. And participants were placed into one of two conditions. So they were either placed into a condition where they read a fictional description of someone with an opioid addiction from physical pain, or they were placed into a condition where it was someone who developed that addiction from psychological pain, similar to like we saw in the beginning. This is the exact excerpt that they had read. Harry recently underwent major surgery. In order to combat the pain, Harry's doctor prescribed him with strong opioid medication. Through his recovery, Harry developed depression. Harry's physical, for one condition, or psychological for the other, pain was too much for him to bear, so he developed an opioid addiction in order to deal with the physical or psychological pain. After reading this description, the participants then rated 17 agreement statements on a 5-point Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And multiple questions combined to make a subscale. There were 5 subscales that I will talk about in just a little bit. So multiple questions combined their scores to make a subscale. So a participant may have seen this. This is actually a screenshot from my survey. So participants would read, I would feel unsafe around Harry, and then rate. I would feel threatened by Harry, and then rate this statement, and then I would feel scared of Harry, and then rate this statement. And all 3 of these questions combine their scores to make a subscale. Like I said, the ratings combined into the 5 subscales, and these were adapted from a previous study by Brown in 2008. And the 5 subscales were fear and dangerousness, which is the one that I just showed you in the previous slide. So how fearful or threatened would a person feel of Harry? Help interact, so how likely would the person be to assist Harry? Responsibility was how likely the person felt that it was Harry's own fault for his condition. Empathy was how sorry a person feels for Harry. And negative emotions were how angry a person feels toward Harry or how hateful a person feels towards Harry. The alphas next to each subscale are indicating that the multiple questions that were asked in the subscales correlated with one another. So alphas that are closer to 1 means that they are more correlated. Closer to 0 is less correlated. And then negative would be that they are correlated in opposite directions. So as one goes up, the other goes down. Fortunately, all of my subscales had positive alphas going in the proposed directions. So this shows that the subscales are reliable and that they are valid for testing. And I made sure that each subscale indicated that higher scores indicate more stigma. As you can see, help and interact and empathy are more lower stigma type scales. So before I analyzed these, I went and reverse coded them. So everything matched that higher scores indicated more stigma. So for study 1, I have my table. So I did 5 independent samples t-tests, looking at the sigma subscales and then the condition. So to give you an idea of what this test looked for, it rated the difference, or it looked at the difference of these 2 scores, those in the physical pain condition and those in the psychological pain condition. And it was looking at if the mean, as you can see, the mean for this subscale fear and dangerousness for the physical pain condition was 2.43, and for the psychological pain condition, it was 2.36. So it was looking at if there was a significant difference between these 2 scores that was considered statistically significant. And I did this for all of the subscales to see if any of them showed a difference. Unfortunately, none of these subscales showed a significant difference between the mean values for either condition. So this shows that individuals hold similar stigmatizing attitudes regardless of the cause. However, these individuals may be using their previous knowledge of an addict to simply just judge Harry based on the label alone, not the cause. And results may differ should participants be in both conditions. If they are in both conditions, participants would, in a sense, serve as their own control. You wouldn't be weighing one person's judgments towards Harry in a physical pain condition towards a completely different person's perspective in the psychological pain condition. So I decided to tackle this in study 2. The purpose of study 2 was to examine if these stigmatizing attitudes towards opioid addictions differ within subjects. And my hypothesis was the same as the first study, that an addiction caused by psychological pain will be stigmatized more than an addiction caused by physical pain. For study 2, I had 194 participants that consisted of different MTurk workers, again from Amazon's Mechanical Turk. Of this sample, 57% were female, 64% were white, and the average age was 39 with a standard deviation of 14. For the method, the participants read both of the description scenarios as featured in the first study in randomized order to make sure that I was counterbalancing so one wasn't influencing the next. And then they completed the agreement statements for both scenarios. And I used the exact same subscale factors as study 1, and as you can see from the alphas, they are also in a positive direction. This again shows that they are reliable and valid for testing. And here we have study 2's table, which I used 5 paired sample t-tests looking at the sigma subscales by the experimental condition. So very similar to the previous study, this t-test is looking at if there is a statistical difference between these two mean ratings. And different from the previous study, this is now looking at everybody against everybody. Instead of those in one condition versus the other, everybody's physical pain rating is now weighed against the average of everybody's psychological pain rating. For this study, I again looked at all of the subscale ratings and wanted to look at if there was a difference between the two in regards to the condition. And I actually found significance in the fear and dangerousness categories. So as we can see from the table, those in the psychological pain condition rated higher stigma than the physical pain condition when they got to this condition. So we can see again that higher scores indicate more stigma. So when people were rating the psychological pain condition, they rated it higher in stigma than the physical pain condition. In addition, there was significance in the help and interact subscale. So as we can again see from this chart, when people were rating the psychological pain condition, they rated it higher in stigma than the physical pain condition. Also, I found, although not significant, it has a trend towards significance, empathy. As we can see again from the table, those who are rating the psychological pain condition rated psychological pain in regards to empathy higher than physical pain, again showing more stigma. Although this is not statistically significant, proposed new research or future research could maybe address this. So these results show that those with psychological pain are seen as more dangerous, and individuals are less likely to help them if they have an opioid addiction. And this is consistent with previous research, as existing research shows that individuals with an addiction are seen as untrustworthy. And also this research is consistent with the previous research that indicates that people stigmatize physical pain less than psychological pain. So my research follows these ideas in previous research. However, as we can see, not all of my results were significant. So these results do not fully explain the stigmatization of an addiction, but may explain some aspects. So that psychological pain is seen as more dangerous and people are less likely to help them. But these are simply just some ideas and, of course, a multidimensional concept. So to conclude, those with an addiction from psychological pain are stigmatized more than physical pain in factors of dangerousness and outsiderness willing to help. However, there are some limitations to my study. I only collected responses from the US and Canada. Different cultures, different countries may have different ideas of stigmatization and thus would yield different results. As for future research, like I pointed out in study 2, empathy did show a trend towards significance. So I think with a larger sample size or a different study, we may be able to see significance in stigma in regards to empathy in pain. And I also think it would be very interesting to look at variations of psychological pain. So maybe someone who has an opioid addiction but developed it in a psychological pain sense of depression, like Harry, or grief from the loss of a loved one. Would the stigma be different between these two scenarios, but still looking at only psychological pain? I think that would be a very interesting next step. If you are interested in any of the references that I had, you may check them out. I have the references listed here. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to contact me, as this is not a live presentation. Please contact me at this email if you would like to discuss any aspects of my presentation. Thank you.